The Alchemist as a mirror of the soul. Some books tell stories, and some books stare back at us in silence. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho belongs to the second kind. It doesn't ask who you want to become, it asks who you stopped listening to. And when that question arrives at the right moment in life, it doesn't sound like literature. It sounds like a calling. A gentle calling, almost polite, but impossible to ignore once it's been heard. Maybe you've spent years building a life that looks right, functional, acceptable, responsible. And yet, something inside you remains restless. It's not obvious sadness. It's a quiet discomfort. A subtle sense that life is moving forward, but you're not fully present in it. This is exactly where the inner journey proposed by the Alchemist begins. When we realize that surviving is not the same as living in alignment with meaning. The paradox is simple and unsettling. The more we chase external security, the further we drift from what would actually bring us peace. And the more we ignore our personal legend, the louder the emptiness becomes. Most people don't fail because they lack ability, they fail because they learned too early to settle for a life with very little meaning. And over time, that choice extracts a high emotional cost. This is not a video about changing everything overnight. It's about changing the way you see. About realizing that inner growth begins the moment you question the normal rhythm of your own routine. When you understand that fear is not an enemy, but a misunderstood guardian. And that spirituality is not separate from practical life. It shows up precisely in the decisions you keep postponing. Throughout this content, I won't retell the story of the Alchemist. I'll reveal what it awakens. Because this book isn't really about deserts, treasures, or literal alchemy. It's about you. About your soul's path. About the courage to listen to intuition. About the personal transformation that begins the moment you stop delaying who you were born to be. So if something inside you feels like it's time to listen more honestly, stay. Maybe this isn't just another video. Maybe it's a mirror. The call that rises in silence. Over the course of my own inner journey, I've learned something important. Life rarely calls us by shouting. It prefers to whisper. A mild discomfort. Almost polite. Something that appears when everything feels a little too normal. That's how it happened for me, and it's how it happens for almost everyone who eventually wakes up to something greater. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho begins exactly at this invisible point, when the soul starts speaking before the mind is ready to listen. And the strange part? We almost always try to ignore it. There is a very specific kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from the body. It comes from meaningless repetition. You wake up, fulfill your responsibilities, talk to the same people, walk the same paths, and still feel like something is off. It's not sadness. It's not depression. It's a kind of longing for a life you haven't lived yet. That's the first knock of the personal legend at the door. An invitation to self-knowledge that doesn't demand urgency, but does demand honesty. Many people believe dreams are just leftovers of the day, noise from a tired brain. I disagree. Recurring dreams, especially the ones that show up when life feels stagnant, are a symbolic language of the soul. They don't deliver ready-made answers, but they point toward direction, like blurred arrows on the map of the soul's path. Ignoring them is possible, of course, but the cost is often high. Years of a life that works on the outside while quietly deteriorating on the inside. Maybe you felt this already. That strange sensation of living a life that looks right, but doesn't feel true. A respectable career. A stable relationship. A praiseworthy routine, and still a silent emptiness. One of the central themes of The Alchemist is right here, when stability becomes a refined form of fear. Fear of making mistakes. Fear of disappointing others. Fear of discovering that you were meant for something different. I often say that the call doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives as an uncomfortable question. Is this all there is? And the moment that question appears, something inside you has already begun to change. Inner growth starts before any visible action. It starts when you admit that you might be living on autopilot, and that admission alone is an act of spiritual courage. In practical terms, this is a powerful moment to do something simple, right? Not to post, not to share, just for yourself. Questions like, what keeps repeating in my life? What do I do just because I've always done it? When was the last time I felt truly alive? This kind of deep reflection creates space for intuition to speak more clearly. I remember a phase in my life when everything looked right on paper but wrong in my heart. That's when I started walking without headphones, in silence. 15 minutes a day. No podcasts. No music. No distractions. It sounds small, but it was in that space that my own inner desert began to speak to me. Spirituality often begins with silence, not elaborate rituals. There is something deeply transformative about admitting that life is asking more of you. Not more money, not more effort, but more truth, more presence, more alignment with the purpose that refuses to be ignored. This is the beginning of inner alchemy, realizing that staying the same is also a choice, and perhaps the riskiest one of all. What's interesting is that when this call appears, it doesn't demand an immediate decision. It simply watches. It waits. But it doesn't disappear. The more you try to drown it out with distractions, the more it returns. Sometimes as anxiety, sometimes as deep boredom. This is when spiritual awakening begins to announce itself, even if you don't yet have words for it. And it's right here that something curious happens, because when you start listening to this inner whisper, life tends to place someone in your path. Someone who says little but reveals much. Someone who doesn't command, only asks. And that presence changes everything. But that is already the beginning of the next step in the hero's inner journey. The fear of leaving the familiar. There is a kind of security that doesn't protect. It only numbs. It took me years to understand that. The comfort zone isn't necessarily comfortable. It's predictable. And predictability creates a false sense of identity. In The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho uses the sheep as a symbol of this. Moving together, repeating paths, never questioning the horizon. Not out of malice but out of habit. And before we realize it, we're living more by repetition than by conscious choice. Fear, interestingly, doesn't show up when the dream is born. It shows up when the dream threatens what defines us socially. Our job, our title, our role in the family, the image others have of us. Leaving the familiar doesn't just mean changing direction. It means risking not being recognized anymore by the people who have always known you that way. And that hurts more than most people are willing to admit. Many people confuse stability with loyalty to themselves. But they're very different things. You can be stable and deeply disconnected from your purpose. At this stage of the inner journey, attachment isn't to what you have, it's to who you believe you are. And that explains why so many people defend a life that no longer represents them. I've seen people stay in careers that were emotionally draining because they had already invested too much to quit now. Relationships maintained not out of love but fear of emptiness. Routines defended fiercely, even when the heart had already left long ago. This is the cost of confusing identity with function. And this is where personal transformation starts to feel threatening. A simple but powerful practice here is to observe your own language. Notice how often you say, "I'm just like that, that's not for me, that phase has passed." These phrases seem harmless, but they act like invisible fences. They define how far you believe you're allowed to go. Questioning them is a profound act of self-knowledge, and a real first step toward inner alchemy. What's curious is that fear rarely says, "Don't go." It says, "Wait a little longer." It disguises itself as prudence, responsibility, maturity. And sometimes it really is. But other times, it's just fear with good rhetoric. Spiritual wisdom isn't about running blindly, it's about recognizing when waiting has quietly turned into avoidance. At this point in the story, something begins to shift inside the listener. A silent conflict emerges. Remain who you've always been or risk becoming someone you don't yet know. This is one of the most important crossroads on the soul's path. Because there is no growth without symbolic loss. Something has to be left behind, even if it's only an old version of yourself. A practical way to work with this is through small, conscious disruptions. You don't have to abandon everything. Start differently. Take a new route to work. Read a book outside your usual pattern. Something like Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, or The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. Small changes teach the brain that the new is not automatically dangerous. They train courage in safe doses. I like to think that inner growth begins when routine stops being a shelter and starts becoming a visible boundary. When you realize that what protects you is also what holds you back. This is when the hero's inner journey gains emotional weight. Because now you know, and you can no longer pretend you don't. And it's precisely when this conflict settles and that something bigger usually happens. Life responds to your restlessness. An unexpected meeting. A conversation at the wrong time. An unforeseen symbol. As if the world were saying, "You're not alone in this decision." And when that happens, the journey stops being only internal. But that takes us into another territory, where choices begin to be tested, not just imagined. When the universe tests your decision. There is a curious moment in every inner journey, when you finally decide, and everything starts getting harder. Many people take this as a sign they chose wrong. But in the spiritual wisdom of The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, it means the opposite. Choosing to follow your personal legend doesn't open doors automatically, it activates tests. as if life were asking quietly, "Do you really mean it?" The meeting with the King of Salem is symbolic because he offers no guarantees. He offers awareness, no promise of success, only clarity, and he asked for something in return. That detail matters. Every transformation requires a small initial sacrifice. Not something grand, but something meaningful. Time, a habit, a belief, something you value. That's how the universe measures the seriousness of your choice. In real life, this shows up subtly. You decide to change careers and receive an attractive offer to stay. You decide to take better care of yourself and work suddenly doubles the load. You decide to say no and feel guilty for days. These are the invisible tests of personal transformation. They're not punishments, they're filters. They reveal whether the desire comes from the soul or from temporary enthusiasm. I often say that the personal legend begins to manifest when you stop asking for signs and start noticing patterns. Repeated coincidences. Similar phrases coming from different people. Books that seem to find you. This phenomenon, often called synchronicity, isn't naive magic. It's trained attention. The world has always been speaking. You just may not have been listening. A powerful practice here is symbolic listening. Paying attention to repetition. Writing down dreams, meaningful conversations, persistent ideas. Not to mystify everything but to recognize inner movement. This strengthens intuition and deepens self-knowledge. The more aware you become, the less you need loud signs. The King of Salem also speaks about something few people like to hear. People abandon their journey not because they can't, but because they get distracted. Secondary desires. Quick rewards. Goals that aren't really theirs. And little by little, they drift away from the soul's path, not in rebellion but in forgetfulness. I've lived this myself. There was a time when I knew exactly what I needed to do, and still postponed it. Not out of fear but because other things felt more urgent. The result wasn't immediate disaster. It was prolonged discomfort. A constant feeling of living almost the right life. And that almost is one of the most draining states there is. At this stage of the hero's inner journey, personal development stops being theory and becomes daily practice. Small, consistent choices. Going to bed a little earlier. Saying no to draining invitations. Saying yes to nourishing study. Books like The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle or Essentialism by Greg McKeown are especially helpful here, because they teach you how to protect what truly matters. What's most beautiful in The Alchemist is realizing that the universe doesn't hand you a complete map. It hands you a compass. And the compass always points inward. Toward what makes sense even when it's scary. Toward what demands growth even when it's uncomfortable. And it's exactly when you begin trusting this inner direction that something unexpected happens. Because right after the decision comes loss. And it arrives without warning. But that is another crossing. The pain of loss in the inner desert. There is a specific kind of silence that only those who've lost something important know. It's not the silence of peace, it's the silence of shock. In The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho takes us there with almost therapeutic precision. After the decision, after the initial excitement, comes loss. The theft doesn't just take money. It takes the sense of control. And with it, newly formed confidence. This is the first great desert of the inner journey. I've learned that the desert is not punishment. It's a space of revelation. When something is taken away, what remains becomes clearer. Guilt, anger, shame, regret, everything surfaces. The mind starts negotiating. If I had stayed where I was, why did I even try this? This inner dialogue is universal. Every deep process of inner growth inevitably passes through this emotional fall. Here, the temptation to give up doesn't appear as weakness, it appears as logic. Going back seems reasonable, say, intelligent. But spiritually speaking, going back at this point isn't physical retreat, it's denying your own experience. Pretending the learning didn't happen. And that creates a kind of pain that doesn't show up immediately but compounds over the years. This part of The Alchemist speaks deeply about identity. When everything is taken, who are you? Without plans, without money, without guarantees. That question is uncomfortable because it dismantles masks. And paradoxically, it's in this emptiness that self-knowledge gains real depth, not intellectual but existential. You realize you're not what you own, nor what you planned, you're what you can sustain internally. A simple but powerful practice here is learning to pause without punishing yourself. Breathe. Avoid making major decisions in desperation. Stay quiet before reacting. It sounds basic, but almost no one does it. Here, spirituality shows up as presence, not answers. Remaining in the desert requires emotional courage, not immediate action. I remember a time when everything in my life fell apart in sequence. projects, relationships, expectations. The impulse was to grab onto anything that would restore a sense of safety. That's when I realized that safety isn't the absence of pain, it's the ability to move through it without abandoning yourself. That insight completely reshaped my philosophy of life. The desert also reveals something subtle: loneliness. Not everyone will understand what you're going through. And that's okay. Not everything needs to be explained. Some processes ask for retreat. Narrative silence, the kind where you simply breathe, observe, feel, is a fundamental part of inner alchemy. It's where the soul reorganizes its priorities. In daily life, this is a good moment to reduce stimulation. Less social media. Fewer comparisons. Fewer external opinions. Silent walks. Reflective writing. Denser reading. Books like Letters to a Young Poet by Rilke or The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann help remind us that not all progress is visible, and that some transformations unfold slowly. Most important of all, don't confuse pain with failure. At this point in the hero's inner journey, pain is a sign of passage. Something old is dying. Something new hasn't yet been born. That in-between hurts, but it also prepares. It sharpens listening, strengthens intuition, and deepens spiritual wisdom. And it's precisely when everything seems stagnant that life does something unexpected. It offers work. Something simple. Almost invisible. And this is where many people underestimate the next step. Work as the alchemy of the soul. After the desert, life doesn't offer grand answers. It offers routine. Or simplicity. In The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho does something deeply wise at this point. He slows the narrative down. Because real inner growth almost never happens in epic moments. It happens when no one is watching. When you have to mop the floor, serve people, repeat tasks, and still remain conscious. The crystal shop represents a forgotten space in personal development, the ordinary. Most people believe they are stuck, when in reality they are being prepared. The problem is that preparation doesn't bring applause. It doesn't make good stories. It doesn't generate external validation. But it builds something far more solid: presence, inner discipline, respect for the process. I like to think this is where true inner alchemy begins. Not the kind that turns lead into gold, but the kind that turns impatience into consistency. The simple into the sacred. Habit into spiritual practice. When you do well what no one sees, something inside you comes into order. Self-worth stops depending on outcomes and starts resting on commitment to yourself. This part of The Alchemist teaches something essential about life purpose. It doesn't reveal itself only at the destination, but in the way you walk the path. Working with awareness is a quiet form of spirituality. Whether in your current job or during a transitional phase, the real question isn't, is this what I want forever? But what is this teaching me right now? In practical terms, this changes everything. If you're in a job you don't love, try shifting your inner posture. Learn something there. Develop transferable skills: communication, organization, discipline, human observation. Read Atomic Habits by James Clear to understand how small daily actions shape profound transformation. Inner growth doesn't happen despite routine, it happens through it. I've lived through phases where I had to accept work that didn't reflect my final dream. At the time it felt like delay. Today I see it as emotional training. I learned how to deal with difficult people, how to sustain consistency without motivation, how to respect timing. None of it was wasted. Everything was absorbed. Spiritual wisdom is built this way, in invisible layers. The crystal shop also reveals a subtle detail. Many people stay in safe places not out of fear, but out of spiritual comfort. They learn, grow, improve, but never leave. Because leaving requires giving up recently earned comfort. This is a new test of the inner journey, more refined, more silent. A powerful practice here is to review your days with honesty. At the end of the day, ask yourself, did I do my best with what I had today? Was I conscious, or merely efficient? These questions sharpen intuition and keep you aligned with the soul's path, even when the external scenario hasn't changed yet. The most beautiful part is realizing that when the learning is complete, the call returns. Not urgently but clearly. You feel that the cycle has fulfilled its role. And when that happens, something inside you no longer accepts staying where it is. Because now, you are no longer the same person who arrived there. And that completely changes the next encounter. An encounter that involves love. But not just any kind of love. Love that does not bind. There is a quiet belief many people carry without noticing. The idea that to love is to hold tightly. In The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho gently dismantles this illusion. The meeting with Fatima doesn't distract from the journey, it refines it. Here, love doesn't appear as an obstacle to purpose. but as a mirror of the lover's spiritual maturity. Immature love demands guarantees. Mature love offers trust. This distinction changes everything. When two souls meet at this point in the inner journey, they don't ask for the sacrifice of the personal legend. They respect it. Love in this context isn't fusion. It's partnership. Not dependence, conscious presence. And that requires deep self-knowledge. Over time, I've learned that relationships that require you to shrink your dreams aren't proofs of love. They're tests of attachment. True love doesn't compete with inner growth. It strengthens it. It understands that each person has their own soul's path, and that preventing the other from walking it would be a subtle form of selfishness disguised as care. In daily life, this shows up in difficult choices. Honest conversations. Clear boundaries. The courage to say, "I love you but I need to continue." And perhaps even harder, the courage to hear that without trying to control, guilt, or trap. This kind of love isn't born from lack, it's born from wholeness. The Alchemist teaches that true love doesn't anticipate loss. It trusts time. It doesn't live in fear of the future. It knows that if something is real, it transforms alongside you. This is a powerful lesson in spirituality applied to real life. What belongs to the soul isn't lost, it deepens. I've lived through relationships where I had to choose between pleasing others and being faithful to myself. And I can say honestly, every time I chose to please, something inside me dimmed. Not dramatically but steadily. Personal transformation demands choices that are sometimes misunderstood by those who aren't yet at the same stage of the journey. A practical exercise here is to observe how you react when someone close to you grows, changes, or desires something new. Do you support them or feel threatened? Do you encourage or restrain? These reactions reveal a lot about the kind of bond you build. Spiritual wisdom shows itself not only in the love you receive, but in the love you allow others to live. Books like The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz or To Love or to Depend by Walter Riso help clarify the difference between love and attachment. They reinforce that conscious relationships are an essential part of personal development, not a secondary detail. The most beautiful realization in this encounter is that true love doesn't create anchors. It creates flexible roots. And flexible roots don't prevent movement. They support return if return is ever needed. This understanding elevates the hero's inner journey to a new emotional level. And it's precisely when love stops being fear that something even deeper begins to unfold. Because now, listening turns fully inward, to a place with no intermediaries, the heart. Listening to the heart is an act of courage. There comes a point in the inner journey where external maps no longer exist. Advice stops working. Formulas fail. This is where The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho leads us to the most challenging meeting of all, the meeting with the heart itself. And no, it doesn't speak only gentle things. It speaks truth. And truth requires courage. The heart in this book is not romanticized. It's presented as a living territory, contradictory, filled with memories, fears, and desires intertwined. Listening to it means accepting that part of you fears suffering, while another part knows that not living is an even deeper form of pain. This inner tension is the true spiritual desert. Many people believe that following intuition means acting without fear. That's a myth. Listening to the heart means acting despite fear. It means accepting uncertainty and moving forward anyway. This is one of the strongest lessons in the spiritual wisdom of the Alchemist. The soul doesn't promise comfort, it promises meaning. Over time, I learned that the heart speaks softly. It doesn't scream like anxiety. It doesn't insist like the ego. It whispers. And to hear it, you have to slow down. Become quiet. Create empty spaces. That's why simple practices like silent meditation, conscious breathing, or solitary walks become real tools for self-knowledge, not abstract ideas. In practical life, listening to the heart may mean uncomfortable decisions. Leaving an environment that disrespects your values, saying no to a profitable but empty path, or saying yes to something that still isn't fully clear. This is where personal development stops being motivation and becomes inner commitment. The Alchemist teaches that the heart carries both wounds and the wisdom gained along the soul's path. Ignoring those wounds doesn't heal them. Listening does. Pain isn't always a sign of error, often it's a sign of depth. And personal transformation begins when you stop running from it. I've tried to silence my heart with logical arguments, spreadsheets, pros and cons, elegant justifications. It worked for a while. But sooner or later the emotional bill comes due, with interest. It was only when I accepted listening to what I'd been avoiding that my philosophy of life truly began to align with who I was. A powerful practice here is to write a letter to yourself, not to the future but to the present. Ask, What am I avoiding feeling? What do I already know but pretend not to know? What am I truly afraid of? These questions don't ask for quick answers, they ask for honesty. And honesty is one of the greatest catalysts of inner alchemy. At this stage of the hero's inner journey, something curious happens. You begin to trust circumstances less and inner coherence more. Not because everything is clear, but because you've learned to recognize when you're out of alignment. And that changes how you move through the world. And when this listening deepens, something greater begins to reveal itself. You realize you are not separate from life. That there is a silent language connecting everything. The language of the world. There comes a moment in the inner journey when something shifts inside you. It's not a specific emotion, it's perception. You begin to feel that you're no longer walking against life, but with it. In The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho calls this the language of the world. The idea that everything is interconnected by a silent intelligence that responds to your inner disposition. Here, spirituality stops being an abstract belief and becomes daily practice. You realize that the world reacts to your internal state. When you move with clarity, the right encounters appear. When you hesitate, signals blur. Not because the universe punishes or rewards, but because your attention recalibrates. Reality has always spoken, you've simply learned to listen better. Many people think signs are extraordinary events. But most of the time they're subtle. A phrase that repeats. A book that opens to exactly the right page. A casual conversation that answers an old question. This kind of synchronicity isn't naive mysticism. It's attuned awareness. It's self-knowledge in motion. I remember a phase when the more I forced decisions, the more everything seemed blocked. When I released control and focused on inner coherence, things began to flow. Not easier, but more aligned. This is a core lesson in the philosophy of life within The Alchemist. Life flows better when you stop fighting who you're becoming. In practice, this requires something simple and difficult at the same time. Presence. Being fully where you are. Eating attentively. Having real conversations. Working with awareness. These seemingly small actions create a different inner frequency, and that frequency influences the opportunities that arise. Inner growth lives in these invisible details. The language of the world also teaches responsibility. When everything is connected, you understand that your choices are never isolated. How you treat others, how you speak to yourself, how you handle frustration. Everything echoes. This understanding deepens spiritual wisdom and removes the individual from the role of life's victim. I like to connect this idea to the unity between matter and spirit. There is no spiritual life separate from practical life. The way you answer a difficult email, deal with a mistake, respond to a delay, all of this is part of the soul's path. There are no less spiritual moments. Only moments with less awareness. A powerful practice here is observing resistance. Whenever something repeatedly stalls, ask yourself, where am I trying to force something that isn't aligned yet? This question doesn't ask for quitting, it asks for inner adjustment. Personal transformation happens when you change the tone before changing direction. At this point in the hero's inner journey, something stabilizes. Trust. Not naive trust that everything will work out, but a deep trust that you'll know how to deal with whatever comes. This is one of the most mature forms of personal development. Trusting your own capacity to move through life. And when that trust settles in, you begin to realize something essential. That the treasure you were searching for outside was never truly outside. But that understanding only reveals itself on the return. The treasure was always within you. There comes a moment in the inner journey when the movement stops going outward and begins turning inward. In The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, the return is not a setback. It is a consecration. Returning to the point of origin with new eyes is one of the deepest experiences of inner growth. Because now you see the same place, but you are no longer the same person. When the treasure finally reveals itself, it is not merely something material. It is symbolic. It represents the awareness acquired, the courage developed, the refined ability to listen to the heart. The great revelation of The Alchemist is simple and unsettling at the same time. The journey was never about finding something outside. It was about becoming someone on the inside. And this completely changes how you understand the meaning of life. Many people feel frustrated when they realize there are no fireworks at the end. No applause. No cinematic, happy ending. What exists is clarity. And clarity is quiet. You begin to recognize what is essential and what was merely noise. You start to understand why certain paths didn't work out. You even begin to feel gratitude for losses that once felt unfair. This is real self-knowledge, not the kind that decorates speeches, but the kind that reorganizes your choices. I often say that the true return is emotional. You return to yourself. You return to the body. You return to intuition. You return to the ability to trust your own rhythm. The spiritual wisdom here is not about knowing more. It's about needing less. Less external validation. Less comparison. Less explanation. Life philosophy simplifies when the soul finds coherence. In everyday life, this shows up in very concrete ways. You begin to say no with less guilt. You choose your battles more carefully. You recognize when something is not meant for you, without needing to prove anything to anyone. This is one of the greatest signs of personal transformation. When inner peace becomes more valuable than external approval. The return also teaches about cycles. Not everything is meant to last forever. Not every phase needs to be romanticized. Some exist only to teach. And when the lesson is learned, insisting is a form of disrespect toward your own journey. This understanding deeply matures the path of the soul and strengthens personal development in a quiet yet solid way. I've returned to old places feeling a strange mix of gratitude and unfamiliarity. Gratitude for what I learned. Unfamiliarity because that place no longer fit who I had become. And that doesn't generate sadness. It generates respect for the process itself. The inner hero's journey does not end with external conquest, but with internal integration. A powerful exercise at this stage is to revisit your own story. Look back and ask yourself, what have I learned that I can never unlearn? At what moment did I stop being naive and start becoming conscious? These answers reveal the true treasure, the one no one can ever take from you. The most beautiful part of this stage is realizing that the search ends. When you stop searching outside yourself. When you understand that the personal legend is not a fixed destination, but a way of walking through life with presence, truth, and courage. Spiritual awakening does not remove you from the world. It returns you to the world more whole. And when this understanding settles, something inside you naturally wants to share. Not as someone who teaches, but as someone who has lived. That is when the journey stops being only yours and begins to inspire other paths. When life stops being a waiting room and becomes a path. I want to tell you the story of someone ordinary. So ordinary that it could be you. I'll call him Daniel. Not because the name matters, but because stories need a face so the soul can listen more closely. Daniel had a functional life, a stable job, bills paid, an organized routine. Nothing was wrong. And yet, something inside him was always quiet, as if a part of him had been placed on standby. Daniel discovered The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho by chance, or by the kind of chance that only happens when we are ready. He read slowly, and at several moments he felt a strange discomfort. Not because he disagreed, but because he recognized himself. The personal legend, the inner journey, the fear of leaving the familiar. It all seemed to speak directly to something he had been avoiding for years. The turning point was not a big decision. It was small, almost banal. Daniel began walking 15 minutes a day without his phone. At first, the mind screamed. Then it got tired. And then, something began to organize itself. It was in those silences that he realized how much he had been living on autopilot. Not unhappy, just disconnected from his own path of the soul. The fear came soon after. Fear of disturbing what looked settled. Fear of losing the image of stability. Fear of failing too late in life. But instead of running away, he did something different. He wrote. Every night he answered a simple question. Did I live in coherence with myself today? Sometimes the answer was yes. Many times no. But honesty began to perform its own inner alchemy. There were losses. Comforts left behind. Invitations declined. People who didn't understand. Daniel felt the desert. He felt guilt. He thought about giving up. But something had already changed. He could no longer pretend he didn't hear his own heart. Intuition, once silenced, now spoke clearly enough to be respected. Work became a field of learning. Even before any external change, he changed internally. He began doing what he already did, but with presence, not obligation. He developed skills. He read books that expanded his philosophy of life. The Power of Now, Essentialism, Man's Search for Meaning. Personal development stopped being content consumption and became daily practice. Love changed as well. Daniel stopped negotiating his dreams for acceptance. He learned to love without abandoning himself. He discovered that mature relationships don't ask you to shrink. They ask you to be whole. And curiously, the more whole he became, the more truthful his connections grew. What was attachment fell away. What was real remained. Then one day, quietly, he realized something simple. The anxiety had decreased. Not because life was perfect, but because he trusted himself more. He no longer needed everything to be under control. He knew how to listen, how to adjust, how to cross difficult moments. The language of the world began to make sense, not as theory but as lived experience. Daniel's treasure was not a title, nor a specific external achievement. It was clarity. It was coherence. It was the deep feeling of living aligned with his own meaning of life. He didn't become another person. He returned to himself, and that return changed everything. And now I ask you with honesty and respect. Backhand index pointing right, where have you been silencing your inner calling? Backhand index pointing right, what do you already know but keep postponing? Backhand index pointing right, which part of your life functions but doesn't pulse? The inner hero's journey does not require you to quit everything today. It requires only one thing: that you stop lying to yourself. One conscious step, one adjusted habit, one no spoken with courage, one yes spoken with truth. This is how spiritual awakening shows up in real life. If something here resonated with you, don't ignore it. Take it into your week. Observe. Write. Experiment. The world responds to those who walk with presence. And your personal legend doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for commitment. If this content helped you see something new about yourself, subscribe to the channel The Philosophy of Awareness and the Soul. Turn on notifications. Here, the intention is not to offer ready-made answers, is to walk together with depth, consciousness, and humanity. Because in the end, the greatest treasure was never buried outside. It was always waiting within you.